Hi, everyone. This is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Madness Cafe. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to read a review that we received from, actually, it's a woman in another Facebook group that Jennifer and I belong to, and she found our podcast through that group. So I just want to, and she didn't say specifically whether we could say her name, so I'm not going to say her name, but once she hears this, I think she'll know it's her. So, I'll just go ahead and read it. She writes, whoever suggested or hosts the podcast Madness Cafe, I started following it a few weeks ago and didn't get a chance to listen until this morning's walk. Anyway, today's episode with Nina Simons was exactly what I needed to hear, and I can't wait to purchase her books. A little recap. It's about women in leadership and how differently it can look and feel for people and yield excellent results. The part about soft skills and how they're viewed as feminine really hit home. In my opinion and experience, soft skills are less valued and thereby less compensated in the workplace when attributed to women, but men in leadership with well-developed soft skills, they're lauded, but we don't use that language to describe them. One of the gems from this episode was, quote, justice is love turned outward. I'm obsessed. Thank you. Thank you so much for that lovely review. It's always so nice to hear from people who listen to the podcast and have discovered it in kind of roundabout ways. So thank you for that. So on to our guest today. We are joined by Elizabeth Mikotowicz. In her 20s, Elizabeth barely survived a very violent relationship which resulted in a severe injury and a prescription from her doctor for opioids that she was not allowed to refuse. She was threatened with Child Protective Services because she was pregnant and refusing medical advice. Elizabeth eventually went to federal prison for a nonviolent drug charge. 5 years ago, Elizabeth was painting murals as a federal inmate. Now she has had her own art shows and has launched an environmentally friendly clothing brand based on her art. Prison opened her eyes to the systemic racism, cruelty, corruption, and inequality in the U.S. Now she tries to expose what she witnessed and endured in order to get necessary legislation passed. Elizabeth created her women's clothing brand, EPM Clothing, during her healing journey, and she wants to help people from all walks of life do the same. Elizabeth is also in the process of editing her memoir and creating an adult coloring book based on PTSD and what she has learned from her trauma. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here. Nice to finally meet you guys.
You too.
You as well. Thank you. We have been really excited about this conversation. And I guess we'll just start today with, tell us your story.
Well, I was adopted at birth by a couple in Brooklyn, New York, and my father got a job at the University of Maine. And so I moved to Maine and lived there my whole life. And, I had a really good childhood. There was a messy divorce, but I was never exposed to drugs or trauma or, violence or anything like that. I had some mental health issues. They put me on antidepressants and it put me in psychosis. So it made everything worse. And come to find out, I'm actually high functioning autistic. I'm not bipolar. I'm not all these other things that I had to go through, before figuring that out. For people like me, the pharmaceuticals aren't going to work. They can make us homicidal, suicidal, completely unstable. I'll say it all the time. Trazodone and Seroquel make me schizophrenic, like literally. So I struggled that way, but I was never, again, exposed to violence or abuse, and I always had a really good support system. It wasn't until, I got my early 20s, I was in a relationship. He hit me with a wooden dowel right above my eye, and a month prior to that, he had ragdolled me across the room, and I smashed the back of my head on a radiator. Had to get stitches that way. So I had 2 really bad head injuries, but the second one, I found out I was pregnant with my son. And because my blood pressure kept skyrocketing, I was like, I don't want to be on this. I'm pregnant. I don't want to get addicted. I don't want my baby to get addicted. They said I was on too small of a dose to get addicted. And that's just
of
big
pharma. Opioids?
Yeah.
Just to clarify.
It was
Yeah.
Vicodin. And
okay.
so yeah, and that was Big Pharma's big lie. They're like, oh, only 2% get addicted, and you can take these high rates, or they were handing oxys out like candy and saying, oh, it's fine to take 160 milligrams a day, you won't get addicted. That is completely false. All opioids do is make the pain receptors in your brain more sensitive. So when you come down off of it, you're in twice the amount of pain. The other thing was I started getting seizures on top of it. So on top of them telling me, you don't take this, we're going to have to call CPS because your blood pressure keeps skyrocketing, I started getting seizures. So my daughter was only 14 months old and she's running around and I'm going, I'm going to wake up to a tragedy because of this. As a parent, that was one of the hardest things I had to come to terms with, she's not safe with me right now. I'm unconscious for moments at a time. I go deaf and blind, and on top of having seizures and waking up. That was from the head injury. After I had my son, I wasn't really trying to maintain my addiction. I was like, well, I don't have to worry about my son anymore. So, it doesn't matter if I take it. I was in a state of trauma and the abuse got worse. This man would trap me in the bathroom and torture me for hours, make me think I was going to get stabbed, to the point where I would beg him to kill me. I never had a conscious thought about hurting him, but I started having dreams about killing him. The psychological abuse that comes with domestic violence, people really don't understand. And it's always, why does she stay? And why didn't she fight back? Or why didn't she call the cops? And it's never, why is he doing this to her?
Right.
We have a very toxic, patriarchal, misogynistic culture. And that's the reason why 98% of rapists never see a courtroom even. And it's just terrible. I eventually went to Spruce Run, the battered women's shelter. They turned me away with 2 beds open. After looking over my hospital records, talking with the police, they said that my injuries were so extensive that it put the other women in the shelter in danger, that my situation was too dangerous. Basically, I made a deal with my father because he's like, if you can't get a place to live, if I'm here alone with your kids, he can show up with the cops and I'm gonna have to hand your son over. So to keep my kids safe, since I couldn't get a place to live and I wasn't taking them on the streets with me, I signed temporary guardianship over, and I lost my health care after that. So now I couldn't get any of my medications. I couldn't get therapy. I couldn't go to rehab or anything like that. So yeah, the shelter turned me away. And that's a problem with shelters, victim-based shelters. The human trafficking shelter wouldn't take my friend in because she wouldn't snitch her pimp out. They were only helping girls that were giving them collars. These pimps will take these girls, everything they have, their IDs, their credit cards. I have friends who were sex trafficked. These predators dot their T's, cross their T's, dot their I's, when it comes to controlling these women and finding out where their kids are, where their family is, and they have networks of people to terrorize these women with. And you're not going to help these women out of this horrible life of getting raped every day because you want them to put someone in jail for you. That's your job. That's not their job. They're just trying to survive. I have a very big problem with victim-based shelters that try to get something out of victims, because this is what happens. We have a country that is failing everybody. Women are slipping through the cracks. 70% of women who have been to prison have some sort of domestic violence or sexual assault in their background before they go to prison. So after that, that was kind of rock bottom for me. And, drug dealers ended up helping me. They gave me places to stay, gave me places to hide, gave me work, and I slowly got sucked into a life I never wanted. And because I was so traumatized, I was in shell shock. I had no emotions left, and I was hardened from it. I wouldn't back down for nothing. I wasn't scared to fight. I wasn't scared of these men. I wasn't scared to die. So I got this reputation and I moved up the chain pretty quickly. So now all of a sudden I'm surrounded by bikers and really shady, dangerous people. And, and I'm looking around and I'm like, oh my God. And I'm completely high and strung out. And I'm deep in my addiction at this point with feds watching me. And I'm realizing, I'm like, this is a movie. This isn't even I would completely disassociate and be like, this isn't really my life. This is watching something on, I don't know, HBO or something. This is not my life. And eventually I caught drug charges in 2011. And, the whole time I had this mentality, like, I just got to get a place, and then I got to get my kids back, and then I'm going to do this. But I was addicted, and I had my own mental health issues that was never going to happen. And it's like, I was lying to myself. That was never going to happen because subconsciously I'd given up. I was like, my kids are better off without me. I'm a mess. That's just what the addiction and the sickness tells you. And it's a really hard, dark place to come out of. But in 2011, I caught charges. I stopped selling drugs after that because I realized what I was doing. I realized I was profiting off of people's addiction, and like that didn't sit right in it was this new substance that swept through our town, bath salt. And this was before that horrible stuff happened in Florida. Like, we were one of the first federal bath salt cases, and it was being sold in head shops. So the government was making their money off taxes from it being sold. All these synthetic drugs were coming over from China, and we're like, hey, this stuff is legal. So that's kind of why I started pushing it. Like,
before we go on any further, because I'm one of the people that doesn't know what that is. What is that?
So it's two components different from crystal meth, but they needed a purpose for it to be sold on shelves. So they called it bath salt. Now you can put it in your bath, but all it does is your pores open up and you'll get high if you get in a bath with it.
So it's like bathing in crystal meth?
Kind of, yeah. Because if you smoke it, it's even worse than crystal meth. Like the highs and the hallucinations can be even more insane than crystal meth. And it's way more addicting. It's more addictive than heroin. Like, I had always been able to keep my addiction in check. Like, if I wanted to stop, I could stop. I could not stop doing the substance.
Wow.
Until I was stopped and put in jail. So I realized, like, all these people were, losing their kids because they started doing this stuff. And that's when I was like, I don't want to have anything to do with this anymore. I don't like that I'm profiting off of something that's causing so much misery. I was sick and I was desperate, and that's the only reason I ever started doing it to begin with. Like, I was a single mom in college. Like, I had dreams, I had plans.
You were young.
Was not to be a drug dealer. Things kept getting worse, and I kept getting more and more desperate. And you're traumatized and you don't know what to do. You're running on survival. That's what happens to so many people in this country. People will get a prescription and they can't pay their rent because nobody can pay their rent these days in America. There's 29 empty properties for every homeless man, woman, and child. Nobody can pay their rent these days. So people will start selling. These are the big bad drug dealers, the majority of them that they're talking about on the news. They're just trying to pay their rent. They're just desperate and have worked 60 hours a week, and they still can't pay their bills because we're living in a dystopian nightmare that is profiting off of our suffering. I got to see that once I went to prison. The real reason we make up 25% of the global incarceration population, and we make up 5% of the world. Like, we have more people in prison than entire continents. People are wondering why. Well, it's all for profit. They put us to work. The second you get to prison, you're working 40 hours a week. A hospital saves $350,000 a year contracting their linen to be washed by inmates instead of paying regular workers a minimum wage. This is all about a free labor. They have bypassed slavery laws. It's always targeted Black communities first, Spanish communities first. It hit the white communities last. And I'll be the first to say, I got 37 months. I would have gotten a lot more time if I was a Black woman or a brown woman. And I don't, that does not sit well with me. Like, I went to prison and I read the paperwork and I'm comparing notes. Like, this is not right. This is not equal justice. It's none of that. I was under the illusion of white supremacy my whole life that, every racism and prejudice and inequality is over. That's why we had the civil rights movement. It was a long time ago. It wasn't
everything's great now.
Yeah. And now that I see it for what it is, I'm just disgusted. I met a handful of women that had been sterilized against their will in prison. And these were American women. And this was before Trump filled the ICE camps up with refugees. And you heard about them getting sterilized. It wasn't many of them. It wasn't like hundreds or anything like that. It was like a couple. But none of them were white. And this was in America. They are committing genocide. This is genocide. And now all of a sudden, with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, it's a great day for white lives everywhere.
Your story is amazing. It's fascinating because it's fascinating to hear you talk about it in such enlightened ways. But I want to go all the way back to you're in the hospital and they give you opioids and they tell you it's not going to be addicting. The same thing happened to my sister. So
made the physical pain go away, which now I was in excruciating chronic pain every single day. To have that amount of head pain, like, it's debilitating because I couldn't see, I couldn't watch TV, I couldn't go to the movies now without suffering immensely. And so it would make that go away. And it also floods your endorphin or serotonin level, one of your happy chemicals, and it makes you feel really good, like everything's just okay. Like, normally I'm a nervous wreck because I'm around this man who's hurting me and sexually assaulting me and beating me whenever he pleases. So it makes all that go away. Like, it makes you just happy, and it's just not living in that state of fear. And when it wears off, it comes with the worst anxiety, the worst chronic pain. It makes
so you take more
ill.
and more
Yes.
to kind of
and
you're basically chasing that feeling.
Yes. And then you get to a point where you build up a tolerance, and it doesn't even help with pain. You're just doing it so you're not violently ill. And now they're just finally admitting that withdrawals can kill you. And those of us who've been to jail, who watched hundreds of people detox, we knew better.
You already knew that.
Yeah, people would die. We don't get, I love it when people say, oh, you get free health care in jail. No, you don't. And 60% of the doctors in Alabama have lost their license. It's legal for doctors to go work at a prison when they've lost their license.
Oh my God, that's terrible.
I have watched the most barbaric, I've watched minor surgeries go on in my unit because inmates could not get proper medical treatment. By the time this girl kept going for, she had blood pouring out of her rectum into her shoes, and they would not take her to an outside doctor to get tested because they didn't want to pay for it. And then by the time they took her, it was like stage 4 all the way at the end. She had like 3 months to live. I watched them turn so many couple-year sentences into death sentences because they would not get women health care. One girl was shoveling the snow, and that was her job, getting paid, pennies a day. And she broke her foot slipping on the ice. By the time they took her to the hospital, like 4 days later, they had to re-break her leg because the bone had fused back together. This is torture. The things that go on a systemic level in there is just disgusting. I mean, they gave me the wrong medication one day, and I got violently ill. They gave another woman the wrong eye drops. She went blind. It was like eardrops or something. Like, they messed up bad. I watched so many horrific things go on with prison doctors. That's if they even want to treat you. I have watched CEOs flip out and get mad because medical wouldn't take an inmate to the hospital, and then it's on their unit, so they're responsible. Like, I watched this one guy he was on insulin for his diabetes. The jail doctor took him off of his insulin that his outside doctor had him on for years and put him on commissary restriction.
Oh my God.
There are sociopaths working in jail, and they love the power that they have over people, and it's disgusting. I was in solitary, and I had a female sergeant telling me to kill myself. She told another inmate that. She was in the paper when I got out for telling another inmate that, and they had to cut him down from a suicide attempt. He tried to hang himself. Like, this is how they're treating people with mental health issues, and it's just insane. And to give you an idea, like, there was a woman in there who was manic for 16 days, not on drugs. She was up for 16 days. All she had to do was sign her name to get out of jail. She signed it Jesus Christ, so they wouldn't let her out. She was she was like, she needed mental health. She
needed help.
Yeah, she went to her old property where she lived with her husband like years ago, and she got confused. So they had this woman locked up for months and months waiting for, a bed. And it's just so disgusting. They maced her. They terrorized that woman. And it was horrible. Like, I will never get that woman's screams out of my head. It was awful. They would leave her in the cell. She'd take her clothes off because she didn't like the color orange. She wanted red. They had red uniforms. They wouldn't give it to her because that's not the proper color for those inmates in that type of unit. She has mental health issues. She's like dealing with a 5-year-old. Like, just give her some clothes. She's not in there freezing, being observed by men constantly naked. Like, and then they'd take her blankets from her. They'd take everything from her. So she'd just be in the cell and would freeze. And it was horrible to watch. When they put me in solitary, they forced me to strip in front of cameras under duress of being extracted, maced. So when they extract you, they show up 12 deep with electric shock shields, batons,
Jesus.
mace. Yeah, this is what they show up for, one unarmed woman, and they use extreme violence. They hurt people in there. And so I was forced to strip in front of that camera. It's in the state of Maine, it's illegal to have cameras inside cells where the inmate is sleeping and going to the bathroom. They were making women strip in front of there. So, because, their high ranking officers would sit and control and watch, basically. So I filed a PREA against them when I was at Alderson.
And what is a PREA?
It stands for Prison Rape Elimination Act. So anything sexual, it's like a grievance. An outside source is supposed to come interview the inmate. This never happens. Wow. Only the jail investigates it, unless if they admit to something, which is rare. But what they did with me is they admitted to everything I was complaining about, and they deemed it unfounded. So it doesn't go any higher, because
so they deemed their own abuse unfounded. Yeah.
So
real nice.
So that's how they bury the abuse. And then when Alderson got the response, they wouldn't even allow me to hold it to read it myself. They read it to me and told me I couldn't have a copy of it, nor could I send it home. So you only have 100 days to file a complaint when you get out of jail against an institution. And the first thing they ask is, was there an outcry at the time? Where's the paperwork? Where's the copy of the complaint? Well, I put one in, but they wouldn't let me have it.
Oh my gosh.
And this is how they bury the abuse, because after that, it's done. I went to the Freedom of Information Act. They couldn't find this complaint. And when I got out of prison, the captain at Alderson and 4 of his subordinates all got charged and convicted for raping and stalking inmates and tampering with PREA evidence. So I wasn't even the only victim, and I was far from the worst one. And so this is what they're doing, and this is how they're bearing the abuse. So this is one of the bills I'm proposing. First of all, institutions cannot continue to be allowed to do their own investigations.
Right.
They're too corrupt.
Right.
Someone else needs to do it. But there should be, and I requested my paperwork from Somerset County when I got out. They told me to get a lawyer, which is funny because they always say, well, if you ask for a lawyer, you're guilty. Those officers love to say that. But now they're throwing it back in my face. And by law, they have to give it to me, but there's no consequence if they don't. They know that. So
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm proposing there'd be like a $500 fine a day that they have to pay that person for every day they stonewall.
How did you get to the point? You said that there's a bill you're proposing. So you're doing the work now for other people.
Yeah.
How did you get to the point where you put a bill in, and how did this process happen?
Well, I don't put it in because I'm not a Maine state representative. But when I got out, I was clean. And the only reason I stayed clean is because Janet Mills took over for Paul LePage and expanded Maine Care. So I could now get health insurance. When I was on probation and LePage was in office, they told me I would have to be pregnant. I'm like, I'm just trying to be okay enough to get back to my other 2 kids, and you're telling me I have to have another one just to get basic health care. When she took over, I was able to get health insurance, so I could get MAT treatment when I needed it, and then I got off of it. I continued counseling, trauma therapy, and I had a really good support system. I just lucked out with my fiance because, he's supporting me through everything, coming on these shows and going to the vendor show that I went to down in New Hampshire. There was a cop up in Calais. Oh, also that article from Somerset County about, the cops and what they did, that came out. And because I let everything go, I was like, whatever, I'm just gonna move on with my life, whatever.
Right.
And then that article came out and I got pissed. So I started requesting my paperwork again. Then this cop up in Calais, he got caught giving a teenage girl drugs to give to her mother because the mother was doing sexual favors for those drugs. So he was extorting her for her addiction. He's been a cop for 30 years. They made sure to say, oh, he's a 30-year veteran cop. I'm like, and he should be held to a higher standard because of it. And so I called up and I called the DA up. I'm like, why is he not charged in sex crime? That is an abuse of power. Correctional officers, it's automatic sexual assault if they have sex with an inmate. Even the inmate was like, yeah, I initiated it. because it's a difference of power. Like,
Right.
you really can't say no to these people. And so I talked to him and he's like, well, the way the law is written, it was consent, but you've made a lot of good points that I've never even thought of, but I've never been in your position either. So you should talk to the Maine state representatives and the Maine state legislatures. So I started contacting them, and I started going to the Democratic meetings and telling them everything they were doing wrong and everything they needed to fix. And people started listening to me. They just passed a bill mandating all jails in Maine provide feminine hygiene products free of charge, tampons and pads. And yes, this is a problem. Women will make their own tampons and, give themselves infections. And when they have them on commissary, they'll jack the price up, triple what they cost out here. A package of ramen noodles in there costs like $1.50. Out here, it costs 20 cents. They are just extorting us every way possible. This one big money pit, the prison system. The other one was the homeless problem just exploded up in Maine. And we went from like 2 encampments to 10 overnight. And these landlords were charging these outrageous application fees. They were doing sometimes $100 per person in the family. And, they get 10 applications a week. They're getting triple the rent, and they don't even have to turn anything on. And you see it on these websites when it shows you how many people viewed the apartment. If it's like 78, they're just scamming people for application fees. And this is free money to them. But they, we spent over $1,000 trying to get a new place, just applying for them to tell us no. So I made a huge deal about it. I'm like, this is why nobody has a place to live. This is why, the homeless problem is just exploding. You can't even get a place. They're just robbing people for application fees, just like the banks and their overdraft fees. They invented that in like the 1990s, and now we don't have a middle class, and now they name their yacht overdraft. Like, it's free money to them. This is immoral, predatory capitalism. And something needs to be done about it because it's driving the economy to hell. Like, everybody, there's 29 empty properties for every homeless person in America.
You're so passionate about this. How did you turn the page to activism? You're an activist.
Well, I was mad. Like, I'm watching my city. I already watched the opioid epidemic turn everything upside down. They've made trillions off of the suffering of the American people, and they want to go across seas and, act like it's the greatest country in the world. Like, no, we are suffering for the benefit of very few. You should be able to work 40 hours a week and have everything paid for. When my grandpa was growing up, he worked 40 hours a week at Sears, like playing Santa and stuff, and he could pay for a house and everything else. Like, you can't even work 2 jobs and pay rent. This has turned into such a sociopathic society where there's no empathy, there's no compassion, where people are being thrown away, pushed into a corner and thrown away and just profited off of. And it needs to be addressed because it's only getting worse. There's a reason why all these jails across America were taking out PPP loans during the pandemic. The money that was supposed to go to the people and adding wings and, units and beds into their prison so they can put more people in jail. And now they're criminalizing homelessness in a lot of cities. You can't even feed the homeless without getting a fine. So they are making this problem bigger. And then they're going to send everybody to jail. And then it's going to be a free workforce for these corporations. We had inmates fighting wildfires for pennies a day. We had inmates moving dead COVID bodies with not being given proper PPP. They're doing a really great job at talking about, the crime and people need to feel safe. Who needs to feel safe? Because after going to prison and spending a decent amount of time with the majority of the people being Black and brown, their communities have never felt safe here. So which communities are you talking about? Who needs to feel safe? The rich white communities? Because you don't care about the poor white communities. You're happy to call them skinheads and let them go to prison and blame them for, racism. When actually it's you driving this entire system that you're profiting off of.
Like Jennifer said, and I'm sure everybody can hear, you are incredibly passionate about all of this, as you should be. I want to bring it back to a personal level, because obviously you had your own personal trauma from that abusive relationship, and developing an addiction and then the trauma that you experienced being in prison,
Right.
you obviously paid your debt to society hand over fist in more ways than you should have. How have you gotten from all of that trauma and the PTSD? How have you dealt with that? What was your healing journey like?
Well, I started painting again. I did the murals in prison. I had that for a side hustle, and I worked out a lot and just started focusing on like taking care of myself. And I stopped hanging out with all my old friends, and I stopped doing all the old things that I used to do. And I really took my mental health seriously because they had me on lithium and like $1,300 worth of medications when I got out of prison. No way to pay for them. But when Janet Mills was out, they still had me on a whole bunch of drugs. Well, they started to not filter through my kidneys properly, and they ended up putting me in psychosis. And because I had been on them so long, it really took a long time. Like, I didn't come out of my house for 6 weeks at one point. Like, the agoraphobia was so bad, and I was like so scared to go back to jail, and I felt like I was just off. I felt like I was crazy. It was just really hard to deal with and get it all worked out. I learned, like, if I eat, mostly a diet of fruits and vegetables and really healthy, no processed foods, and not a lot of sugars, it'll bring the manic issues to a minimum, and it'll bring like the lows to a minimum as well. Like, it was just really figuring out that these doctors had been wrong, and they don't like to hear that they're wrong. There's a lot of arrogance that comes with PhDs, and they don't
and with an MD for sure.
And so I just kind of had to find my own way a lot of the time, but I got into writing and shadow work and meditation.
You also mentioned that your diagnosis was incorrect and you're on the autism spectrum, which I think we are definitely finding more and more women every day that weren't properly diagnosed because it was mainly diagnosed in young boys.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't actually have an official diagnosis, but I took several tests on, several of the official autism websites, and I scored significantly high on every single one of them. And they have like a 98% accuracy. The more I read about it, I'm like, yeah, that fits me. Like, I have all the sensory issues and the textures, and it's just more subtle than I didn't really communicate that well till I was, 3, 4. I was a little bit late in that too. I've learned to accept myself, with all my flaws. Like, I used to be really self-conscious about having, a diagnosis, but it's more, if you can figure it out, the positives, and learn how to harness it, it can become like a superpower. Autism brains, like, they move like a lot faster than the regular neurotypical people. And you can actually do some pretty incredible stuff with it. You just have to not let society tell you you're defective because you don't fit in their little box. And I'm perfectly fine with that. Like, I've seen what y'all got going on out there. Like, it's crazy.
One of the things that you said in your bio was you wrote, drug dealers helped her or took advantage, depending on how you look at it. How do you look at it? Did they help you or did they take advantage of you?
They did help me in a lot of ways. They also took advantage of the fact that I was in a crisis. And, a lot of men do that like to have control over women. And it's just, that's something men like to do. They like to play a hero. So, the woman owes me, or the woman, whatever. And I had to learn the hard way. Like, and a lot of the time they weren't really my friend. They were feeding off of the fact that they knew I had a blind loyalty issue.
What would have helped you in that situation?
I think if I could have gotten a place to live, if I could have gotten rehab, if maybe even a relocation with all of those things and proper medical. I was going to manipulation therapy for the pain and, all that stuff, but it wasn't like really helping. But it's something that I should have kept monitoring, and I didn't because I couldn't.
Right. You were doing the best you could with what you had.
Yeah.
You were trying to make the best of a really unfortunate, crappy situation. And honestly, I think we need to kind of shine a light on, you did what was best for your kids too. You had your kids go stay with your dad. In light of all these other things, you kept your kids safe.
Yeah, so, and always my main thing. Like, I will keep my kids safe, even if that means it's away from me. And then it got to the point like, well, I had this man after me, you know, chasing me around on the street. And then I was so crazy from it. Like, I felt like I was no good. I was no good for them. Like, you know, the days I would take them, I wouldn't even go to sleep with them because I started waking up and violently thrashing from the nightmares. And I was so scared of having a nightmare when I was like next to them. So I wouldn't go to sleep with them anymore. That killed me.
Yeah.
How is your relationship with your children now?
It's good. My dad adopted them when I got out of prison because I was still going through the medication, and we were in this tiny little apartment on First Street, and they were living in a big mini mansion. So I wasn't going to take them out of that to be with me in my mental health crisis. I'd go see them when I was having like a really good day and I was like calm down, and that sucked too because for like 6 weeks I was like so ashamed and I was so scared that they'd get freaked out, one of my panic attacks or something. Like, I wouldn't come see them at all, and I felt so much guilt for that. But it's like I was so scared of them seeing me in like a bad state. And like, I wasn't doing drugs. I stayed clean after I got out, and that was it. But like, I just felt so like, and it was like taking down an emotional dam when I finally got out. Like, when I finally got to sit still and like really unpack it, like, cause I was just pouring anger over it and, you know, moving on and disassociating and just blocking the trauma as much as I could. When I finally like stopped and really started to process all of that, it was awful. It was overwhelming. And it was a really dark place.
You mentioned your painting.
Yeah.
And that has been part of your healing journey. And for people who are watching on YouTube, behind Elizabeth is one of her beautiful pieces right there, which is
I got
gorgeous.
some other stuff to show you guys too. So
yes, please.
Over the pandemic, I found this company called the Galleries. They're from Montreal, Canada, and they turn all of your art into this beautiful feminine clothing line. It's environmentally friendly, and it comes in plus sizes. Like, this is one of my bags.
So I love that.
That is beautiful.
Thank you. And you can see all the paintings on the tags.
Oh my gosh.
I got it being sold in a few stores, but I've got dresses, I've got scarves, I've got pants, I've got shirts. There's really something for everybody.
We looked on the website, and your art is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. You are so incredibly talented. We'll put a link to the site in our show notes, but I highly recommend that people go and see the beautiful, beautiful pieces that you've created. Wow, those are gorgeous.
Yeah, and you can like match whole outfits. Like, you can get the bag, the shirt, the pants, the scarf. You can do the whole thing with just one painting.
Wow. So what's your inspiration?
You know, life. Because it's funny, because like one day I'll be like super gothic and paint like dark femme stuff, and then the next day I'll be doing like koi fish and like butterflies and flowers and stuff.
I love all your koi fish. That is beautiful. That's too pretty to be a placemat. I would frame that.
Yeah, that comes on Scowl. We had a special name for that, Scowl. You can use it as a headdress too. Oh, and we have pillowcases.
So how did you get connected with Le Galeriste?
They popped up on my Facebook, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And like, I was kind of worried like about the quality, and because you never know. But when I got it, the quality is just so good. And like, the colors are so bright, like it matches my painting perfectly. Like, they just do such a good job, and everything fits right. Like, you know how like skinniness is shoved down women's throats, and like
yes, we do.
Yeah, well, like some brands, I've watched my friends have like whole like body dysmorphia issues because some brand decides they want to size their pants like 4 sizes too small. It breaks my heart because, you know, I never struggled with eating disorder. Like, I didn't struggle on that mental health issue, but I had so many friends that did, and it would just crush me. So I'm so happy that these sizes, they're a little bit big. Like, I ordered a small and it was way too big. I was like, oh my God, this isn't going to affect anybody's like mental health issues. Like, this is great. And everything just fits nice. Like, it doesn't matter what kind of body size you have. It will look good on you. Like, that's what I'm so happy about this brand, because I just want to like empower women, and like, or anyone that embodies the divine feminine. Don't necessarily have to be a woman. Empower you, feel stunning and beautiful. You know, this world tears us down enough. You know,
I have
as
so many questions about this. You keep saying divine feminine. What does divine feminine mean to you?
It's that feminine energy that women, we bring life into this world. Like, we have portal between our legs. Like, we are magical, and men are threatened by that, and they really hate women for it. And instead of respecting us and treating us right how we deserve, they do want to, you know, subdue us. I'm just not mentally stable enough for that. So
none of us are. Okay, none of us are mentally stable enough for that, because it's abuse.
Yeah,
it is abuse. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, I have to say, Elizabeth, I love that Jennifer said it earlier, that you are an activist, and you are literally living this in every aspect of your life. It's not just that you're passionate about, you know, making sure that women are safe out in the world, in prison, in hospitals, that people can get the mental health treatments that they need and the right medication. But then you're also talking about it in your art, and that you want people to see and honor the divine feminine, and you want your art to be represented by clothing that isn't going to trigger somebody's body dysmorphia. You are literally, you're walking the walk and you're talking the talk.
I try.
No, seriously, you are doing it. You're not just trying. I have to tell you, you are succeeding, and my hat is off to you for that. That is amazing. That is so cool.
When you envision yourself maybe 2 or 3, 5 years down the road, what does that look like for you?
I want to have this brand in like a retail chain store like Kohl's or something. And I've been watching workshops on how to figure out how to do that. So I've got a plan. I want to have my memoir published, No Justice, Just Us. I have it written. It's just the editing part has proven to be really hard, but I've been good about more consistent lately. So I've got
What's it called again? We didn't hear that very clearly.
No Justice, Just Us.
Love it.
Nice.
Love it. Please keep us posted on that.
Absolutely, I will.
So a memoir, the clothing line, you're going to keep.
And I have a coloring book. There was a style of art called Zen Tangle art in jail. And my mom sent me books. And it's just super easy, like doodling, meditative stuff. But I wanted to create a coloring book with that style of art. And I was going to include all of everything I've learned about trauma that, you know, helped me get through the worst parts of it and understand what was happening to me. Because, you know, that's the other battle, half the other battle. Like, you don't always understand what's happening to you and why you're reacting this way. And you just feel like you're losing it. So I think that's important. And, you know, just dumb little things I used to do to like distract myself, so the PTSD wouldn't totally take over and cause an issue in my life.
That's beautiful. I'd love to have that coloring book.
Yeah, please keep us posted on both of those. Yeah, because look, we'll help hype them as much as we can, and we'll have you back to talk about them. Elizabeth, what do you want our listeners to take away from today's episode?
You know, I think no matter how far you fall, like, as long as you don't give up, you know, you're not failing yet. I had to, you know, fail a million different ways before I could finally get it right and figure out my mental health journey. And it took 20 years to, you know, work out some of it, but I still did it. And no one's going to do this for you. Like, don't go to a doctor thinking they are going to solve all your problems for you. Like, if what they're saying isn't aligning with how you're feeling and how you're reacting to whatever medication or life in general, don't listen to them. Arrogance comes with PhDs. And, you know, I think they do a lot of more harm than the good they take credit for. So, not to say they're all bad, just saying, you know, be cautious of that. Like, you have to do the work yourself, and it can be beautiful. It will always have painful, horrible stuff happen, but, you know, it can still be beautiful.
Oh, I love that. Life can be beautiful. The fact that you can say that, Elizabeth, after everything that you've endured, I think is a testament to your spirit. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Elizabeth, my daughter told me something very similar earlier today when I was asking her about life and the pain of life, etc. We've had a huge loss in our family, and my daughter said, "Mom, you can't fail at life."
Wow.
It was a very similar message.
I love
I've
that.
heard it, and now I've heard it twice today. Thank you.
Synchronicities.
Yeah.
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 That's
excellent.
Wow. That's huge. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you really want people to hear?
No, I'll probably think of something like later on tonight. That's usually like how that goes. But I think I've pretty much covered it all.
Awesome. Well,
You're inspiring.
You really are. You really are. And the passion that you show for the things that you care about is admirable. So keep doing all of the work that you're doing.
I will. I'm too
thank
stubborn
you for your work.
Shut up about it. So
that's a good thing.
Yeah, nothing wrong with being stubborn.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
And now let's wrap up the show.
I'm just really touched. I have a friend who is dying of cancer right now. She's not going to make it, questioning life, like questioning, like, what is the fucking point of life? And then I hear a message so clearly twice in one day. It's a gift. Elizabeth gave me a gift today. You can't fail at life. Life is about experiencing, right? It's about living and being and experiencing. One of the things that I admire so much about her is this expansion of creativity. The divine feminine has also been a theme in my life recently. And creation, I think sometimes women think that creation just means having children. It doesn't. It means it's so expansive. Of course, children can be part of it, right, but it's so expansive. We women are the creators. Mm-hmm. We are. Her life, her art, and her activism, the fact that she is pushing for bills that none of us would even have the information to push for. Like, I wouldn't even know that I should be out there knocking on doors, talking about the application fee that is keeping people away from getting homes. I don't even know about that. Right. So her message is so important because I haven't lived it. So I don't know. Right. I need her to tell me.
Right. Which is another reason why it's so important to have input from people who are different from you.
100%.
Their experiences are always going to be different from yours. And how are you going to know if you don't listen to people who are different from you? I am amazed at the energy and the light that she just shines, right? I don't know how Elizabeth has survived all of the things that she survived, and she's not bitter. She has taken all of this and she's turning it outward to help other people. She's not letting all of the things that have happened to her fester and turn her into a bitter person. She's helping other people. And I just think that's amazing. I mean, it's you see so many people who become bitter from far less than what Elizabeth has lived through. But she isn't bitter. In fact, she's hopeful. She has plans, and she's bringing beauty into the world with her art. You know, she's trying to bring more justice to the world with the legislation she's trying to influence. So, I mean, I think we all can take a huge lesson from that. Like she said, yes, there's pain and there's crap in the world, and life can have its bad moments, but life is beautiful. That's a very touching thing to see. And I'm so happy that we've gotten a chance to talk to Elizabeth and help share her story with our listeners. I hope our listeners are as touched by her story as we are.
Oh, they will be. She's the divine feminine.
I love that. Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, she's embodying the divine feminine. She's bringing beauty into the world, and she's seeking justice, and she's seeing the beauty in the world. I love it. What a great conversation.
Bye.
Bye, Jennifer.
Thanks everyone for listening today. We will be back with more Madness Cafe next week. You can find us on Instagram at Madness Cafe Podcast or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com. Bye.